Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/historyfangirl. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Kindle, Android, or MP3 player.
For today's episode, we have Maggie Garvin, and Maggie is the travel writer behind the amazingly hilarious travel blog Bags on the Move. And she also is a former Disney employee. And she's here to explain the history of Disney World and also try to convince me, a complete Disney skeptic, why adults should go there and think it's awesome. Hi, Maggie.
Hi.
So, Maggie, how did you end up becoming someone who loves Disney?
I don't know that I became someone who loved Disney. I was a Disney nerd from way back. My family vacationed there a lot when I was a kid. Obviously, I watched all the movies because we all did. I did a lot of weird projects on Walt Disney in high school. So I think it's kind of born into me.
It's funny because you were one of the coolest people I know that loves Disney.
I know that's not cool.
And what I like about it is that, you are seriously, legit. If you're listening to this, you should go check out her blog. She's hilarious. You are awesome. I have such a girl crush on you. And so I need to understand why you love Disney so much, just for, my sanity. And I think a lot of us who learn the history of Disney learn about Walt Disney, and we learn about Walt Disneyland and how that got started. And I feel like in my head, the story kind of ends at Disneyland, and I don't understand why there's even a park in Florida.
Okay. Walt's portion of the story ends shortly after Disneyland because he dies. But he did build the park in Florida, died before it opened.
So he dies right before it opens. What was the Disney company like right before Disney World was conceived? Why did they want to have a park in Florida?
So they had opened Disneyland. I think they didn't know how popular it was going to be. It was opened because Walt was taking his small children at the time in the 1950s to other zoos, carnivals, circuses, and obviously those are disgusting hellholes. And as an adult, he hated having to be there with a bunch of sticky, screaming kids.
Okay.
So he opened his own park. It was going to be clean and fun. And I think it took off more than they had expected. But he bought exactly the amount of land he needed, built the park. They update it every so often. They add new rides and stuff, but it's a very finite amount of space. And a lot of industry has grown up around it. So a lot of other hotels and restaurants and stuff. So he wanted to be able to buy this land where he could own all of it and expand on it, and have enough space where you wouldn't see the outside world when you were in the park. So that was kind of what led him to Florida. So it was all just an empty swamp at the time.
And when how did he pick Orlando?
Well, he was looking to do one on the East Coast since they already had one on the West Coast. And at the time, people weren't traveling quite as easily. So people from the west side of the United States wouldn't necessarily go east and vice versa. They weren't getting a lot of traffic from the eastern seaboard. So he picked Florida in general because it's warm all the time, so it could be open. They looked at Niagara Falls area briefly and then realized it could only be open 3 days out of the year because it's cold and miserable up there. So they picked Orlando because that's where it was the intersection of a couple interstates. It was easy to get to. They already had an airport, and it has beautiful weather. But it was, a swampy wasteland, and all the land was super cheap.
That's funny. So on last week's episode, Valerie Stimick, who's another travel blogger, was on, and we were talking about Houston, and Tampa was the runner-up for Houston, and for the same exact reason, just a place that was warm enough that they could do business 365. And it's just funny to me that Walt Disney World and NASA were looking for very similar things at similar times, because I rarely connect the two in my head.
I mean, we do have the Kennedy Space Center here now, here in Orlando.
Yeah, I know. It's Orlando is, it's one of those places that I feel like every time I go there, it's for a very specific reason. I don't know what you do there. We'll talk about this later in the episode, like what people do in Orlando that's not like if you're going there for something specific, but I forget that they're all connected, which is just crazy.
Okay, so picked Orlando because all the land was really cheap. It was undeveloped. It was all mainly inhabited by alligators.
Still.
Still true. We've pushed some of them out. We scoop them up when we find them now and like throw them in even deeper Florida.
So they picked Orlando. What was it like when it opened? Like, what was the reception like? Did people understand why there needed to be a newer, bigger East Coast Disney?
Yes, definitely. So Disneyland had been open. It opened in Disneyland in California, opened in 1955. So 1965, 10 years later, was when they started. They called it the Florida Project. Walt Disney opened all of these, obviously. Walt Disney opened all of these secret companies under pseudonyms to buy up all the land so that people wouldn't know it was Walt Disney, because at the time Disneyland had been so successful, and obviously Walt Disney was a huge name and he didn't want to drive the price up. He wanted to be able to buy all the land really cheap. I think it was like somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 an acre at the time. So he made fake companies, bought up a ton of land. And then towards the end, the Orlando Sentinel, our local paper, broke a story that they found out it was Walt Disney. So like the last few acres he bought, the price had skyrocketed because they knew it was him. But everybody was already on board. Disneyland had been wildly successful. It was very crowded. Walt Disney said it had become a second-rate Vegas because of all of the building around it. So he was like really upset. Yeah, he was upset that it wasn't like an immersive experience because all of the tourist industry that had built up around it and was kind of encroaching on its space. Disney World here in Orlando has 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, like 25 resort hotels, constantly adding new stuff, and they've only developed about 35% of the land that they bought. So it really is like all encompassing. When you come here, you can stay on property and like never have to leave. I don't recommend it. There's great stuff outside of it too. I'm also kind of an Orlando ambassador in addition to Disney nerd. But yeah, so everyone already knew that Disney knew what he was doing, and I think in 1965 was when they broke the story that it was actually Walt Disney buying up all that land, and people were pretty excited about it from the beginning.
How did it come to replace Disney World? Did it replace it, or Disneyland? Did it replace Disneyland right away? Because I think most people, when they think of a Disney vacation, think of going to Disney World first and Disneyland only if they're closer, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it replaced Disneyland certainly for international travelers. And honestly, right after, so Walt Disney bought up all this land in 65. Disney died in 69. Walt Disney World wasn't officially open till 71. So he actually died right before its completion. But from the opening, his brother took over. Roy Disney opened the park. Certainly international travelers gravitate towards Disney World because it is bigger. There's more space for them. There's more for them to do. And then all these other theme parks kind of open up around it too. So shortly after Universal Studios, SeaWorld, it's kind of this theme park mecca, whereas Disneyland is sort of all there is in Anaheim. And there's just not room for a ton of people. There's 2 parks, there's 3 hotels. Even just walking around, like it's clear Disneyland is clearly not built for the amount of traffic that they get. I mean, last time I was there on a layover, I had a layover of like 9 hours in LA, and I was just going to pop into Disneyland like you do. And it was a Saturday, and I literally, like, me and my husband walked in, thought about getting in line for a ride, decided that was miserable, and then we just ended up at Trader Sam's, their tiki bar, for the rest of our layover. So it's not constructed for even the amount of traffic that they get, and they get significantly less traffic than Disney World.
When Disney World opened, what were the original parks there?
So the first park was the Magic Kingdom, which is the iconic Disney park. They have the same one in Disneyland. That was the original Disneyland park as well. So at the time that Disney World opened, Disneyland only had the one park as well. California Adventure came later. So it's the Magic Kingdom. That's where they have all of what we know as the classic rides. They've got the big castle. That's your like picture spot. And then it wasn't until way later that the other parks joined. So Epcot was the next one in 1982. So they had, for the first 10 years, it was just the one park.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So we're completely spoiled that there are so many parks there now.
Yeah, they've been just kind of slowly adding them. So it was just the first park. Walt Disney's vision initially was Magic Kingdom, the first park, which was similar to Disneyland, but bigger and kind of built for more traffic. And then Epcot was supposed to be an actual like livable city. It's the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, is what Epcot stands for. And it was supposed to be kind of a futuristic city where people would actually work and live. But they obviously turned it into a theme park after his death.
Oh, I had no idea. So what did he think people would do there? Besides like drink around the world?
Yeah, Drink Around the World, I do not think was like top of Walt Disney's mind. I would argue that maybe it's a little bit better than. It was a very like 1960s vision of the future. There's a lot of kind of concept art and models of what he had originally envisioned floating around the different parks. There's one if you go on the TTA or the People Mover in Tomorrowland, you'll see a big like scale model of what he originally wanted. But monorails were part of it because that seemed very futuristic at the time. It's really like a 60s sci-fi community.
Have you seen, this is going to sound so weird to some of the listeners, but have you seen the Katy Perry video where she's in like a 60s style theme park? That has to be based on this.
I would imagine that it is, but I'm also a huge out of touch loser that hasn't seen that.
Well, I can't remember what the video is, but I've seen the video a lot because oddly enough, my boyfriend likes to play like YouTube videos, and for some reason, whenever you play music videos, eventually you get to Katy Perry. If you never stop it, she always shows up towards the end of whatever playlist. So I've seen that video a lot because I just don't turn it off when he leaves, and then eventually gets to Katy Perry, and then it's over.
Okay, so it sounds like you're like a low-key Katy Perry fan.
Like low key. Like I'll sing it real loud if I'm by myself, but like I wouldn't put it on a playlist to play for other people. You know what I mean?
Okay. All right. So secret's out.
So Epcot was there. What came after Epcot?
After Epcot was what is now Hollywood Studios. At the time, it was MGM Studios because they had a contract with MGM that expired within the last few years. So they changed it to Disney Hollywood Studios. But it was MGM, and it's themed after just kind of old Hollywood. So they have atmosphere characters that walk around and like Hollywood starlets and directors and whatnot. And they had the Great Movie Ride, which recently closed actually within the past year or so. But kind of a look inside the movies with the golden era 1930s Hollywood.
What's the most popular park today?
Still Magic Kingdom.
Okay. Because people want to be princesses.
And you got to get like the picture in front of the castle. And now everyone wants to take the Instagram photo in front of the purple wall, which is a ridiculous thing, but.
Has Instagram, so I feel like I had a very serious conversation about Angkor where I feel like Instagram has ruined Angkor a little bit. Has Instagram ruined Disney, or is it so already in that mode of like everything's perfect that it's easy? Like, is it harder for it to ruin?
It's certainly harder for it to ruin. So it's not like, being hesitant to go to Santorini because it's all like girls in dresses twirling. Like Disney was already sort of full of nightmare tourist.
Excellent.
So it's kind of fine.
So after Disney World opens, what do you like in my head, and I'm sure that this is not real life, but in my head, people in the 50s and 40s who went on vacation, maybe like post World War II, are taking like family vacations in their Cadillacs on Route 66 and like going to drive-in movies together and like playing on like lakes with like gorgeous wooden deck chairs. And then Disney World comes along and like now everyone wants to go to Disney. What was the real impact on like family vacations during this time after it opened?
I think it's certainly revolutionary. I think it's still an impact on family vacations. I think at the time it was probably good, and I would argue that now it's like really expensive and stressful for a lot of families. So mostly you'll just see families like screaming at each other and kids in tears. Happiest place on earth. At the time, I think there was a very, this was Walt's idea of it at least, was there was a clear distinction between like things adults do and things that were for kids. So when he was with his kids, he'd have to, sit on a sticky bench while they were on a merry-go-round or go to a disgusting fair. And I think he saw that there wasn't a lot for families to do together that everyone could enjoy. Like you'd take your kids out and you'd suffer through watching them do kids stuff. Because like that's what good parents do. And he wanted kind of a family vacation that the whole family could enjoy. So the idea of it initially was something that would draw both adults and children, and they would be able to experience together and everyone could have a good time.
Do you think that it's still like that today?
I think that it can be. I think it's very different in Disneyland and Disney World too. And I think Disneyland, because it is smaller, I think it still draws more of a local. Because of that, they get a lot of repeat business. I do think that they kind of keep it a little bit nicer. They tend to get kind of cooler, updated stuff. They're really more on top of the maintenance and things like that because they have regulars coming back again and again and again, whereas Disney World gets like a new crop of tourists every day. So it is more to take care of, but I feel like it's still, obviously they pump a lot of money into it and they keep it nice, but I don't think it's quite the same as Disneyland. There's also a breed, believe it or not, of like way huger Disney nerd than me that are super, super into Disneyland. Like, I know I have friends that work there that have told me there's like a guy that walks around and just makes a list of like light bulbs that are out and then like reports it to people.
Oh, that's got to be a fun job.
No, people are crazy. There actually is a convention that they alternate where they host it, but Disney, when they have it every other year in Disneyland, the D23 convention, which I've been to exactly once. Like I thought I was a Disney fan until I went to this. I'm like, I love Disney, but I am not in love with Disney. This is next level. I don't think I like anything enough to like enjoy a con about it though.
Yeah, I feel like that. Like I love Game of Thrones. I couldn't go to a Game of Thrones convention. Like I get that.
No. This I had like, I had friends that were like working it, and so it wasn't like quite as sad and lame as it sounds. I didn't just go to go.
So what was it like to work at Disney? Did it like ruin any of your like pre-Disney, like, you know how sometimes you get behind the scenes and it's too much? Like,
yeah, it ruins the magic a little.
Yeah.
That is, everyone said that it would. I'm a natural cynic though. It didn't ruin the magic for me because it added a different level, but I was never one to be like, oh, it's the real Mickey Mouse, I'm going to get my picture. Like that's not really my scene anyway. So I guess if you're that person, maybe don't work there. I loved working there. A lot of people I know, obviously it's like a huge employer here in the Orlando area. So I know a ton of people that still do work there. It's a very bizarre experience. There's kind of like some Stockholm syndrome going on. Like they pay really poorly and maybe don't treat you the best. And it's like long hours and really sweaty and you absolutely love it. And then like defend the company to anyone. It's very weird. But I'm on the other side of it now a little bit, but like not totally. But I absolutely loved working there. Not really sustainable long term if you want things like a house and food, but at the time really good.
What did you do?
I was a Jungle Cruise skipper.
Whoa.
So for like the non-Disney nerds, I drove a boat around a river and made jokes about plastic animals.
That actually sounds amazing until like a crocodile eats a toddler on your boat.
Oh yeah, so like it was its own little community. Like our skipper crew was pretty tight knit. I do legitimately hate children, so I'm just throwing that out there. This isn't like I was just waiting to make magic for them. I loved it when there were no kids. Like, best case scenario is just like a group of 20 or 30 somethings that came over from Epcot and were like totally smashed and laughing at my jokes. So this was not about the kids at all. I did work with a girl though, so every so often, every few years, they like do a new campaign for the parks. While I was working there, it was the Year of a Million Dreams, where they were giving out various like prizes at random to people. Sometimes it would be like whoever's sitting on this bench at 12 o'clock wins a Disney cruise. But then there were like much smaller little moments of magic. What we had to do at the Jungle Cruise was get a child skipper, which is like when our managers were there and actually watching, we had to like pick a kid on the boat and let them drive, which is, a nightmare. But I actually, not me, because I would have quit absolutely immediately. But I did work with a girl who picked a kid and got him and like let him steer the boat. Super adorable. And he got so scared of being in front of that many people that he literally shit on her shoe.
No.
Yeah. That's for you, Rachel. You're welcome.
Part of me just feels like that would happen more often than like once in a career in a place with that many children who are that excited and have that much sugar in their system.
Yeah, I mean, it's not usually on you. Like, certainly we had kids full of sugar, like, throwing up, and it's never been on me. And the idea of it, like, being on your shoe and then having to just complete the rest of your day is so horrifying.
So, what were some other, like, did anything else weird or, like...
Oh, you want to hear my favorite cruise story?
I do want to hear your favorite cruise story, obviously.
Okay. Favorite is maybe how I should not have presented that. It's a good one. It's horrible, and I understand that it's horrible. So we were working. The boats go around the river about 10 minutes. We have what we called the rope boat, which was for people with mobility issues. So if they had to like transfer out of a wheelchair onto a boat, we had, I'm going to try to like paint a mental picture for you, but there were cleats on the back of the boat, and then there was a rope on the dock. So this specific boat, we would put the rope on the cleat, and then you drive the boat forward until the rope was taut, and then it was like flush with the dock so it wasn't rocking back and forth so much so people that had trouble walking could step in easier. Then we had this guy that was putting the rope on the back of the boat and just like kept his hand there a little too long while the boat moved forward. And the rope, he got his thumb caught between the rope and the cleat of the boat and severed the tip of his thumb.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's why it's not favorite. It's certainly not favorite.
That's horrifying. This was many years ago.
This was many years ago. I mean, this is like 10, 12 years ago now. I'm sure he's living a full life. It was just the tip. Just the tip. But the best part was the handling of that. Was he just like, obviously was like in shock and just stood up and like didn't say anything and just walked behind a shed and then was, started bleeding profusely. I had to be like, excuse me, I lost a thumb.
Oh my
God. But
gosh.
rather than like search for this, everyone was like, oh, well, it probably dropped in the water and is gone forever. He went to the hospital. My friend Tracy, another shout out, like 2 hours later was putting the rope on the back of this boat and his thumb was just like still there in the cleat.
No, that is so, it's like, there's something about when bad, terrible things happen at places that are supposed to be fun all the time that just makes them 1,000 times worse. That is horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying. I shouldn't have said favorite, but like
most memorable.
My friend Tracy now is the ultimate story topper. So anytime you're having a bad day, she's like, well, I found a thumb. So you never want to find a human thumb.
At Disney World? No.
Best though, like, so it's hot as balls here all the time. And that thumb had just been like roasting going around the river for 2 hours. And they took like those little trash pickers and picked it up and put it in a like Disney merchandise bag with some ice and took it to him at the hospital. Like, what are they going to do with that?
Oh.
It couldn't be reattached because it was, a raisin by then.
That is not what you want to happen when you work at Disney. None of that.
No, I'm ruining my chances of ever working there again, but definitely like kids were just sitting by a severed thumb for a couple hours.
I feel like Disney should pay you lots and lots of money because I have several friends that I respect a lot that are very smart who, as grown-ups, go to Disney World from Pennsylvania several times. Like if I've known these people for like 10 years, they've probably gone to Disney 5 times, which sounds to me crazy. It sounds completely nuts to me. I went to Disney World twice as a teenager, but I didn't pay for anything while I was there because I went on as part of a competition. And that was super fun, but it was also like free, and I was 16 and I had a crush on the senior that was on the trip when I was a junior. Like, it was very fun, but like I couldn't imagine going as an adult. So I feel like they should pay you just lots and lots of money to go around the country and tell adults why they should go there. Because when people tell me they go there as adults, I think they're crazy.
I have thought about that because I've been very pro Disney for the childless adult, but I also feel like that's maybe not the market that they are going for, is like full of drunk childless adults. It's the market they're getting. It's happening, but I don't know that that's what they want to pump their resources into. But if any Disney execs are out there, I will gladly be a brand ambassador.
I feel like that I am considering figuring out how to come to Florida to visit you and go to Disney World with you. And there's no amount of money that anybody else could pay me to do that. And I'm like, hey, maybe I should spend money and go see Maggie and go to Disney. So like, really, they definitely owe you.
I will show you a good time. But it's a particular breed of like childless adult weirdo that ends up here. Like it's a love-hate relationship. I do love Disney. I do enjoy going there. They do treat their employees pretty poorly. Not all of them, but like frontline it's rough. I did a college internship, so I got the roughest of all of it. But it draws a certain kind of people. There is a kind of an island of misfit toys aspect. You meet some real weirdos.
I assume that most like carnivals, fairs, and like amusement parks are full of people that are.
Oh, for sure.
But like
this is like a higher grade carny. Like I like to think we're a step up from like Toothless Jim throwing darts at balloons.
But just barely, or by like a lot.
Oh, you know what? I've met some real weirdo. It runs the gamut. There are some Toothless Jims. When I first started, we did work with a guy we just called Snaggle, who would like drool all over the mic. We had to be on mic on these boats, and we just had to like, you just pass the mic off to the next person, and his was always wet.
So if somebody was going to come to Disney, let's do with kids, what are your recommendations? What do you see people, I mean, you don't have kids and you're not an advocate for people having kids, but if people were to come with a family, what would you suggest they do? And then we'll get into your real tips for the childless adult.
Okay, so obviously the whole thing is geared towards families with kids. There's plenty to do. I try to avoid a lot of it because I think children are little monsters. I would say best tip for a family, don't get a stroller for your kid if they can physically walk. That's a thing that's not fun here. So you see a lot of like pretty, like kids that are basically my height. I'm short, but like not stroller short. So I'm fine with like a kid. Maybe if your kid can't walk, don't spring for a Disney vacation because they're super expensive and your kid's not going to remember it. And if your kid can walk, maybe don't push them around in a stroller. So I think my tip, and it's hard because it is so expensive and there's like so much pressure and people save up their whole lives to take their kids to Disney. But like take it easy, maybe do a few things. Don't do the whole itinerary because kids get tired and fussy and like honestly they really just want to be at the pool or like looking at a squirrel or playing with a box. Like they do not care because they're not people yet. But there's obviously plenty for your family to do. I think maybe sleep in a little. If your kid gets fussy, go back to the hotel. Stop trying to like push them into doing stuff. Don't scream at them for being afraid to go on the Haunted Mansion in front of people because it's awkward for everybody.
That happens?
Oh, that happens so much. There's a lot of, you're ruining this vacation.
I feel like my family, even as grown-ups, that happens on every family vacation still.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think families are just hard in general. And then, like, you add that it's, like, swampy, hot, and everyone's just been eating churros for, like, 5 days. I'm not a good one to ask about the family vacation, perhaps.
So
I don't see why you would want to take kids anywhere.
So that is partially why, like, one, that I just love traveling places with you. But two, why I think you're just such, like, an interesting person to talk to Disney World about, because you have, like, 1,000 things that I don't think I ever would have thought to do, because when I was there, I couldn't drink yet. And I still liked, like, I didn't like the kid stuff, but I got it, you know? But, like, when you go to Disney,
so
what do you do?
I get the kid stuff. Like, I will go on the kid rides for me. I just don't want kids to be on them.
Okay, gotcha.
So, like, I fully support most of the, like, kiddie stuff being there, but I think it should be there for exclusively me and only people that I like and no children.
I like a world in which maybe parents left their kids at home and did the Disney World vacation without them. That would be hilarious.
I would pay amount of money to go to a Disney park with no children.
Do you think they should have like a kid-free day?
I mean, I don't think they ever would, but it would be great for me. I say that about everything, though. I would also pay any amount of money for like an airline that's 18 and up.
So if somebody's going to go to Disney and they're not going to have kids, or they're going to have some time where the kids are with grandma, what should they go do when they have this precious alone time in Disney?
Okay, so we do have like really great restaurants, and your kids are going to ruin it. So if you want to go to a nice restaurant, leave the kids at home. We actually have Victoria and Albert's recent, it's not even recent now, it's probably been like 10 years that they changed their rules to not allow children. And it's like a crazy expensive, like wine pairing, chef created, seasonal tasting menu. I've only been once, and it was years ago, but I think it's like in the neighborhood of like $200-ish a person. So like, I don't know why you would want to bring your chicken finger eating kid there, but people were outraged at the notion that kids wouldn't be allowed because it's Disney and it's for kids. So I don't know, the adults only Disney is a pipe dream for me, but there are places you can go. Victoria and Albert's is one if you want like a fancy night out, but there are a lot of great restaurants. Every restaurant at Animal Kingdom Lodge is great. Boma is awesome. It's all like African food. It's a buffet, so you have to like get your elbows ready. It's a little bit of a fight, but Jiko, not a buffet, awesome food. But every resort has like fantastic restaurants, and you don't have to pay to get into resorts. So you can just go to fancy restaurants without having to like have a ticket to the park. The parks have some good ones too. But obviously, if you don't have kids, the bars are where you want to go. So drinking around the world at Epcot, number one. Drink in every country. Start early. That is my tip. We always start too late, and then like the last 3 countries we have to split up and each get around and then like meet at a central location. And then you just have 100 drinks in front of you, and it's like a frozen margarita from Mexico and a hot coffee drink from Norway and like a shot of aquavit, and that's a recipe for puking. So if you start early and start in Canada. That's my tip for drinking around the world. It's a circle, so you can start in Canada.
Why? What's the other option?
So to start in Mexico. So it's a circle, and you enter it where, like, to your left is Mexico, to your right is Canada. Canada basically only has beer, so it's easy to, like, get out of the way on the front end, but drinking a whole beer is really hard when you're, like, when you've been drinking cocktails. So I like getting that done. And I tend to settle in Mexico. Every time I've started in Mexico, I've accidentally sat down and had like 3 margaritas and a couple tequila shots and like 7 orders of queso. And then it's like, you've got an hour left to plow through the next 10 countries.
What other countries are there?
Okay. So if you start in Canada, you'll do Canada, the UK, France, Morocco. See if I remember all of them, I'm trying to get them in order. Japan, America. That's a hard one because no matter where you start, America's in the middle and it's only heavy craft beers.
Ooh.
So that's your hump to get over, America. Then I should know this. It's hard once you're in the middle, though. This is where it all gets fuzzy. So I think Italy. Yes, Italy is after America. Germany. Then this kind of comes up to interpretation. There is the African outpost, which is basically a shack that represents all of the continent of Africa, except Morocco, which has its own country.
Do you think that's why Donald Trump thinks Africa's a country?
Probably. It's newer, so it's not like it's not African representatives. All of the other countries have interns from whatever country working there, so you can actually go and like meet people from around the world and ask if this is really what they drink, and then they'll laugh at you. Africa just has like regular Midwestern Americans working it. They sell like hot dogs and potato chips, but it is an extra country if you want to like squeeze one in there. They've got a very popular drink in Africa, I'm told, called the brown elephant, which is that amarula, like cream fruit liqueur and Coca-Cola, which I think no African has ever drank, and that's disgusting.
I don't know if I was there before. So I went to Epcot in 2001 and 2002. So I don't know if I was there before Africa was there or not. I just remember getting really excited about German chocolate, but I obviously wasn't drinking.
Yeah, Germany, they have a caramel shop now. That's really what's up.
Anything else that a person should do if they want to go to Disney World as an adult?
So drink around the world. That is expensive. Oh, I didn't even finish the countries. Wait, I got to make sure I can do it. So African outpost, China, Norway, Mexico. Done.
Gotcha. What did they drink in Norway?
So in Norway, they have aquavit, which, well, my go-to in Norway is the Viking coffee, which again, I imagine is not very authentic, but it's basically like, I think it has some sort of, it's like a coffee drink with like Baileys and maybe some sort of Norwegian liqueur, or maybe not. It might be coffee and Baileys, but they call it Viking coffee. If you want to go authentic, though, you can do the Viking challenge. And sometimes they'll give you a celebration button for it. But if you can take a shot of aquavit and not make a face for 10 seconds while these like tall Nordic folk count you off, then you're a true Viking, and they give you a button and you get to wear it around all day.
Have you ever won?
I always win. I do nothing but win.
Excellent. I have not been to Norway and I've never tasted that, but there is something that sounds very similar that is in Iceland that is just like drinking fire.
Like the Britovan? Yeah. It's similar. It doesn't have that like rye bread taste that the Britovan has, but it's basically their version of like that shot that every cold country in Europe will give you, the Suica or the Reiki or like any of it. That's just like, they do it like it's no problem, but I'm in my 30s and shots are hard.
I just realized, like, so in Bulgaria we have Rakia, which is like our version of that. And I just realized that I could order ones that were sweetened. And they're still gross, but it's much easier to do. And so there's like a horrific video of me for my friend's birthday last year trying to do a double shot of Rakia. And that's when I realized I will never do it unsweetened ever. It was Chris Mitchell, actually. He was on the Istanbul episode for listeners. And Maggie, you know Chris Mitchell very well because we lived on a bus in Romania together for a million years.
1,000 bus years together.
So, right before we went to Romania, it was his birthday. So he came to Sofia so he wouldn't have to do it alone because he was in Europe for that and some other press trips. And so we got him a double shot of Rakia for his birthday. And he did it like a champ. My boyfriend did it like a champ, and I had to do it in two shots. It was horrific.
I would always. Yeah, it's so hard. We actually discovered in Greece when I was in Plakias, they squeezed lemon juice into it. And again, like still pretty awful, but slightly less awful.
Well, what I like about this is that even though Epcot is not a true like representation of what these countries are like, it does make you curious about them. And then you get to the real ones and you're like, oh, this is totally different, but the alcohol is just as terrible.
Yes. It's good too because of the cultural representatives that work there. So depending on where you start, should be Canada. If you do Mexico, whatever. But that's the thing too. Yeah, you don't want to end in Canada. We all know about Canadians. No offense, Canadians, but like as you go around, you get to kind of talk to the people and then be like, do you guys like make fun of all of us like white Midwestern Americans that come and just shoot some like bastardized version of what you would actually be eating? And then they all laugh at you. And so it's a cultural experience on it in its own right, I think.
Well, like for me, I think it's like, okay, if I had a family, it costs just as much money to take a family to like Prague or Italy as it does to take somebody like a family to Disney World. So in my head, I'm like, go take your family to Italy because you're going to spend, unless you're like very local and can drive, you're going to spend almost the same amount of money, especially since flights are so cheap now. But if you can if you can introduce your children to 11 or maybe 10 and a half cultures, maybe it's worth it.
Yes. So honestly, even with flights, like getting into Disney is expensive. Everything you buy at Disney will be expensive. It's a pricey endeavor. But also a lot of Americans don't have passports. There's a lot of families here that I don't think would ever consider taking their children to Prague because that's so scary.
What about like London? I mean, I know that like my family would, like a lot of my family will never go to Europe, but I don't know if they'd go to Disney World either. They'd go to like the Rockies or San Diego or something. Disney World is just like, like that's the thing for me. It's like, I actually am kind of excited to go now that I like know a little bit more about like why it exists and like how to do it without children. But, and I probably will figure out how to come see you and do it. And I want to go to Kennedy Space Center anyway.
You got to do it.
But it is so expensive. Do you have any tips for keeping the price down other than working there and getting an employee discount?
Yeah, working there, getting an employee discount. Great idea. They're always hiring. But not super practical for the vacation. It is really expensive. Honestly, for the experience, I think that Disney does customer service better than anyone else in the hospitality industry. So I absolutely think if you're going to splurge on it, that it is worth staying at the Disney resorts and being on property and doing it upright. I think you'll have an awesome experience. But if you are looking to cut corners, there are a ton of off-property hotels that are a lot cheaper. They do allow you to like take your own food into the parks if you want to bring sandwiches and any of that. That saves a little bit of money. They do a dining plan and they occasionally do deals on it where if you stay at one of their hotels, you get, there's a couple different ones, but it's basically, you can do like a quick service or a full service one where you get 3 meals and a snack a day or something. And the prices vary. And sometimes they even do deals where it's like free if you stay at their hotels. So looking out for those is good. As far as admission, there's Florida resident discounts, but for most people traveling, like that kind of just is what it is. But I think you can cut corners, but I think it's worth it to not have to like carry a backpack full of sandwiches around a theme park.
What if you just like always want to have a backpack full of sandwiches and that's just like extra?
Well, I think you should just in life always have a backpack full of sandwiches.
What months do you think are actually good for people to go to Disney World then? Because like I don't think people plan ahead for how hot it is sometimes, and that would definitely make a vacation more miserable.
Yes. It's pretty unpredictable weather-wise. Summer is obviously going to always be hot, but we have pretty good weather year-round. Our winter is usually like 3 days where it'll be, between like 40 and 60. And that's miserable and we're all upset about it, but it's short. But you could I do think coming in winter is a better bet, but like you could hit it wrong and get one of those like rogue days where it's 45 degrees. And I mean, for a lot of people, I guess that's not super terrible. But as far as crowds, the best time, January, after the second week. So New Year's is super busy. Any holiday is super busy, but the end of January, early February, awesome time to come. And then like September into early October. So those have great weather, and they also are not going to be super, super crowded. They're kind of our dead season, which is still pretty crowded, but less so. And if you come in September or October, Epcot has the International Food and Wine Festival, which means they add like 20-something new countries to those 11 countries, making drinking around the world impossible and a fun challenge.
Well, Maggie, where can people find you? Because they obviously all need to follow you.
Well, I'm Mags on the Move at everything. So Instagram, Mags on the Move, Twitter, Mags on the Move, my website, Mags on the Move. Feel free to follow. Come visit me in Orlando. That was for everyone, but mostly for you, Stephanie.
Oh, thanks. I really am I'm coming this summer. I'm trying to figure out if I can justify maybe greyhounding it down to Orlando from DC. We'll figure it out. Sounds more fun than some of my alternative options.
Okay, you can find some super cheap flights.
Yeah, that's probably
We also
true.
have an enchanted tiki bar now, so throw that in the mix. Yeah, that's really good. Well, they had one in Disneyland first, but ours just opened a few years ago, but enough years that it's like not super crowded anymore. 18 and up after 9 o'clock. Maybe 21 and up. I don't know.
Oh.
But we both make the cut.
I hope I get ID'd.
They serve you.
I will not get ID'd.
I'll see what I can do. I'll try to arrange it for you. But they serve tiki drinks, and then all of them have like a show. So like you can order the Krakatoa, and then it comes in like a little volcano cup, and then a volcano explodes in the restaurant, and everyone screams at you, and you get nice and drunk.
Well,
so Trader Sam's.
On the show we've covered like the history of Bordeaux with Megan Stetzel, actually, our mutual friend. And we covered like the history of Guinness, and like I think there was one other beverage that we covered, but I'm blanking on it now. But none of them have sounded quite as appealing as going to a tiki bar with you. So I might have to figure out how to make this work.
Well, it's not necessarily super historically relevant. I'll say that. But it has been around for maybe like 3 years now.
I'll go into Magic Kingdom, get my historic pick of the first park, and then we'll go hit the tiki bar.
Sure, I'll give you a historic tour of the Magic Kingdom. You could pay for one if you want. They do an official one, but I could just on the down low give you a little Disney history.
I feel like that would be more fun. But for listeners who are interested, and I feel like especially if you are forced to go on a Disney vacation and Disney's not your thing, but like maybe the wife or the husband's like, we got to take the kids. Hopefully we've given you some history. You can go do another history tour there if you want to get further into it. But then also some things to do if you can manage to find a babysitter. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.